Shabbat Shalom, everybody. It's nice to be back. It's nice to be with you again. And I love this community, and I love your rabbi. And I want to talk to you tonight a little bit about what was and what is. In Hebrew, we have this word for God, Adonai, Haya, Hoveh, Yeh, the same letters, Yud, Hey, Yud, Vav, Hey. But I want to talk about the first two, the what was and what is. What we learned together from the civil rights era and how what we learned can be of service to what's going on in our lives right now, whether it's politically, whether it's socially, whether it's internally. There's a lot that we could learn from those early days, and I want to start in Birmingham. I had the great honor in last June to actually attend the church service where the bomb took place in 1963, where the 4 girls were murdered in the ladies' lounge. And it's still a working church. And I went there on a Sunday in Birmingham last year, and I loved what the pastor based his sermon on. So I'll start my sermon as he did. He said that every James Bond movie you've ever seen starts the same way, where James Bond is doing something, but then he becomes imperiled and he's about to die. But we know he doesn't. We know no real danger comes to him because it's James Bond. And so the pastor of the 16th Street Baptist Church said, we must learn to live our lives as if we are the James Bond, and this is our movie. This is our James Bond moment. And so I want to, if I can, just create a narrative to understand how it was that, of course, we know the civil rights movement came about because we created a common enemy, not unlike we do today in America. And the common enemy back in the 1800s was, of course, the black person. They were the less than, the inferior, the not like us, the other. And it wasn't until after the Civil War when they got their rights with the 13th and the 14th and the 15th Amendments where they were allowed to become citizens to vote if you were a black man. But the white community, especially in the South, would say, you may have your freedom, but we will have all the power over you. And there was a gentleman in 1890 named Solomon Calhoun who at the Mississippi Constitutional Convention said, let's tell the truth even if it bursts the bottom of the universe. We came here, meaning we came to America, to exclude the Negro. Nothing short of this will answer. And so the narrative is set. And for many years, from then, after the Civil War until about 1950, we've got the Jim Crow era, where the white man was saying, you may have your freedom to the black community, but we have all the power. And then, I don't know how many of you know this, I just discovered this, in 1947. There was a really interesting cartoon, or Superman was put into a comic book where he was talking to some school kids, American school kids, about America and what is American and what is un-American. So he's standing in a gymnasium and he's around these kids and he says, and remember, boys and girls, your school, like our country, is made up of Americans of many different races, many different religions and national origins. So if you hear anyone at school talk about another schoolmate against their race or their religion or their national origin, don't wait. Tell him that kind of talk is un-American. This is 7 or 8 years before Brown versus Board of Education would undo segregation and when Rosa Parks would not give up her seat on the bus. The Jim Crow era ends around the time that Rosa Parks gets arrested, and we have the ascent of Dr. King, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., as we must give him all of his titles. And he brings in this era of nonviolence. And I want to talk about nonviolence for a moment because it's really something I think it'd be interesting if we would consider What would our lives be like today? What would this country be like today if we could engage in nonviolence? I suspect it'll never happen again. It was the first time in America that nonviolence was used to create a revolution, and I don't know it's ever going to happen again. But nonviolence he got from Gandhi. Gandhi called it satyagraha, love force, truth force. Seek love, seek truth, and seek understanding. He gets the nonviolence ideas from Henry David Thoreau in his 1849 essay called Civil Disobedience. And so, according to Dr. King, in his own words, nonviolence can transform the oppressor's heart. We will wear you down with our capacity to suffer, and we will still love you. I don't know many leaders that speak this way anymore. We will wear you down with our capacity to suffer, and yet we will still love you. So don't let anyone ever pull you so low as to hate them. We must use the weapon of love, compassion, and understanding for those who hate us. We must realize that so many people are taught to hate that they're not totally responsible for their hate. My mother used to say to me two things every day. She'd say, if it's raining, run in between the raindrops, which I could never really master. And two, go out and make nice, which I've spent the rest of my life trying to master. And when I heard her say it as a child, I would think to myself on the way to school, make nice? Because isn't nice just what is? Isn't the world full of nice? Because as a child, my world was as large as the circle of hands that could hold me, and all those hands that held mine were hands that taught me about kindness and making nice. I didn't know about the world outside that circle, where nice had to be taught and nice had to be made. I've come to understand that it's easy to love those whom are easy to love. My dog, my nephews, even though they never return my texts. It's easy to love those whom are easy to love. The work, and listen carefully to exactly the words I'm saying, the work is to find a way to love the others. I didn't say love the others. I said the work is to find a way to love the others. We say, love your neighbor as yourself. And on one of my buses, it might have been yours, I don't know, but a participant pulled me aside and said, you know, that idea of loving your neighbor as yourself, it actually isn't love as a verb. It isn't love as an action. It really means, according to this participant on my bus, behave towards others in the way you'd want them to behave towards you. Lovingly. It's not a command to love. It's an invitation to consider behaving differently, to make nice. Something I really want to make clear. Dr. King, Gandhi, and Thoreau, when they were talking about nonviolence, they never said that nonviolence does not mean non-disruptive. They never said you can't disrupt. They just said not to be violent. And so the ideas of nonviolence, there's a few principles. It's about transforming society. It's about a way of life, not just for a few months, but for your life. It's about winning understanding and friendship. And nowhere in there is it about being right. It's about winning friendship and understanding, love over hate, and of course, justice. Reverend Shuttlesworth, who was the leader of the movement in Birmingham in 1963, where so much in the movement happened in 63 in Birmingham, had a pledge that every child who participated in the Children's Crusade in 1963, marching because their parents couldn't, because if their parents marched, they would get arrested and there'd be no food on the table. So children, for the Children's Crusade in 1963, got out and marched, and they had to pledge 10 things. He called it the 10 Commandments of Nonviolence. And I want to give you 3 of them. And this was given to me by a woman who survived the 16th Street Baptist Church. She was in the church at the age of 14, and she now teaches in Birmingham. And she showed me the actual 10 Commandment page that they had to sign. 3 of them that he had them sign says, we seek justice and reconciliation. We are not seeking victory. Let me say that again. The goal of nonviolence, according to Shuttlesworth in 1963, was about reconciliation and justice. It was never about winning. We pledge to observe with both friend and foe the ordinary rules of courtesy. The ordinary rules of courtesy, a word I think we need to reclaim. In the 12-step rooms in AA and Al-Anon and the others, they say if you have to detach with someone, try not to detach with an axe. Instead, try to detach by being cordial. Cordial and courtesy, words which don't exist so much in the world today. All I have to do is think about what happened in LA yesterday to a senator. Courtesy, common courtesy, and the words that are used here are the ordinary rules of courtesy. And the final one that I loved in this 10 Commandments of Nonviolence, we pledge to pray daily to be used by God in order that all men might be free. Those of you who are on my bus will remember that we started one of our days with the prayer, my favorite prayer from the book of Isaiah. I'll say it here again. You wake up in the morning, and if you say this prayer, a dangerous prayer, dangerous because if it comes true, it's not convenient. It's not, dear God, make my life better. It's, dear God, well, Adonai, Hineni, Shalcheni. Here I am. Send me. Send me, and I will be of service. And we think, send me to Tahiti, not to Selma, Alabama. But there we were, and there we are. So the idea of signing a pledge as a teenager or a child to protest for your parents' right to exercise the right to vote. I pledge to pray daily to be used by God. Hineni shalcheni. Make me a shaliach. Make me your messenger. Use me in order that all men might be free. So what do we learn from Dr. King and Shuttlesworth and all the others who led this movement years ago, who we need their leadership now? What have we learned from them that I can impart some to you tonight? So the first thing I'll say is, in Judaism, we have this expression that we say when we hear about somebody having died. And I have a judgment about the expression because I think it's what we say when we don't know what to say. It was the truest, kindest thing, I think, to say to somebody in pain, emotional pain, is to say, I see you. In Judaism, we say, may their memory be for a blessing. It's a bit trite already because it's said all the time. And I often wonder, are we making their memory? Is it may their memory? Isn't it our job to make their memory a blessing? It's up to us. How can we make Dr. King's memory a blessing, and Rosa Parks' memory, and those 600 people who were beaten on the bridge on Bloody Sunday in '65 in Selma? It's up to us to make their memories a blessing. And I want to give you some ideas how to do that tonight. And the first is this. This is important, and use this if you can in everything you do. When you are feeling inferior, when you're feeling beaten down, when you're feeling like their team is winning, whatever side you're on, and they're the winning team, here's what I want you to do. Remember this expression. Powerful people bless other people. So the first thing to make their memory a blessing is to remember to bless others. And the way you bless others is by telling them the truth. I did it with Stephanie as I got up to the bima. You bless others by noticing them, letting them know you heard them, being there for them. And in the days of the civil rights movement, some of the ways that people were blessed, I don't know if you know this. I don't think I said this on the bus, but after the bombing in 1963 in September in Birmingham, the 16th Street Baptist Church, it was Judy Garland and Carolyn Jones and June Allison who rallied their friends and their families and the public, their fans, to raise money for the hospital bills and the funerals for the girls who were killed, right? And so they made their memories a blessing. And in Selma, when people came from all over, because Dr. King asked his cohorts to come on down, his peers to come down and march with us on Turnaround, what would be Turnaround Tuesday, someone had to house them And it was the poorest of the people in the poorest city in Alabama, Selma, who opened their doors to house other people. And then a Jewish young college student named Joan Mulholland, who's still alive to this day, was famous for sitting at a lunch counter in Jackson, Mississippi in 1961. And while her friend Ann Moody, black college student, had mustard and ketchup and hot coffee poured on her, sitting by her side, blessing her and being with her. The second thing I want you to remember that we learned back in the days of the civil rights movement is something that we are doing tonight so beautifully, and it is singing. John Lewis, who started the Freedom Rides and was on the bridge and created the Bloody Sunday Bridge, the whole incident there. He used to say that a movement without singing is like a bird without wings. And in the park in Birmingham, where the crusade happened, the children's crusade, where they were hosed by fire hoses, by firefighters at the hands of at the command of the police chief, Bull Connor, to hose them down where they were lacerated, hoses that could tear the bark off of the elm trees in the park. There's a statue in that park with children behind a jail cell. And underneath it, it says, "We ain't afraid of your jail." And there's a reason that's there. Because when they were arrested, they're second graders, they're sixth graders, they're 30 kids in a jail cell that can hold only 7 adults. They would, in the dark of night, sing because it gave them courage. And it also infuriated the jailers. So they sang. We must keep singing no matter what. The next thing I want you to remember that we learned, a way to bless their memory, is to support one another. And it can be done in so many different ways. You didn't get a chance to meet Linda Blackman Lowry. She was not feeling well that day. You got a chance to meet Miss Barbara Barge, as you heard about. But Linda talks about how when she was a child marching, she was arrested many times. And in one time that she was arrested, they were put in, all the girls were put into a tiny jail cell in solitary, and she broke the window of this little cell, this little jail, so there'd be some air and some light. And when the jailer came, he looked at the girls and said, "Which one of you N-words broke the window?" So she raised her hand and she said, "I did." "What's your name, N-word?" "My name is Linda Blackman Lowry." At which point, she says, all of her friends in jail with her said, no, I'm Linda Blackman Lowry. No, I'm Linda Blackman Lowry. And the jail was full of all Linda Blackman Lowrys. They were all standing there together, united together, all for each other, supporting each other. We know that in Montgomery during the bus boycott with where Rosa Parks started it, that if white people wanted to help out, they helped by driving their workers, their cooks, their nannies to and from work because they were walking. The buses were being boycotted. And then I want to remind you of something you already know, but in the words of Bishop Woods, the 91, almost 92-year-old bishop who we met in that park in Birmingham, he says, "Stand up because God can't use you sitting down." The point he's making is we've got to keep moving, keep marching, keep working. And Dr. King, when he gets to Montgomery at the end of the 5-day march from Selma to Montgomery to the state capitol, he gives one of his speeches. It's called "How Long, Not Long," because no lie can live forever. So he's on this makeshift stage in front of the Capitol, and he's giving this speech to 30,000 people, some protesters, mostly celebrants. And he sees the 300 marchers who marched in 5 days of rain all the way from Selma to Montgomery, 54 miles. And he knows they're sunburned and their feet are blistered and their clothes are tattered. And he thinks to himself in that moment as he's giving his famous speech, how long, not long. He thinks and he remembers hearing a woman in Montgomery during the bus boycott 10 years earlier who was walking to and from work because she wasn't taking the buses. And she said, "My feet is tired, but my soul is rested." We have to keep going even if our feet are tired in order to rest our souls. But the greatest thing I can offer you in terms of how to make other people's lives or memories a blessing is to be your authentic self. Is to know that you're enough, exactly as you are. A couple years back, when we took our bus, as we do every Sunday morning, to Ebenezer Baptist Church, it was a group of teenagers who were leaving, and a woman approached. And she approached the religious school director who was in charge of the group of kids. They were from a synagogue in New York City. And she asked this young woman, do you mind if I talk to you just for a second? She said, of course, no problem. And so the kids were all sitting and waiting. And she said, yeah, this is going to be awkward, but I need to tell you that you look just like my daughter. And I'm sorry to tell you that my daughter was murdered a few years ago, and I can't get over the resemblance. Would it be okay if I hugged you? We never know how much, by being who we truly are, our authentic selves, we never know whose lives we are touching and healing because we have the courage to be exactly who we are. When I was a dancer, when I started out in my early 20s as a dancer, my very first dance class, my teacher's name was Leah Kreutzer, and she said to us all that day, today I'm going to teach you how to be a dancer. So here we go. Hold out your hands. And we all did and thought, oh, this is easy. All right, now she said, show me your story in the palm of your hand. I could do that. That's easy. All right, now show me my wounds on your body. Show me my wounds on your body, and you will be a dancer, and you will heal me. And what Leah Kreutzer was saying to us, that very first dance class I ever took, was that if we understand how to be authentic, it's impossible for beauty not to shine through us. Beauty is shining through us, your beauty, shining through all the time. And the more you know that, the more beautiful you are. She was saying it's important to understand that beauty shines through us regardless of whether we know it or not, but it's important to know it. Many years ago, I had the great honor I got an award from a community center in Fort Lauderdale with Chaz Bono for community service. And Chaz told this amazing story and then gave me permission to share it with my audiences. And so I'm going to share it with you. It's a true story that happened many, many years ago. And as I tell you this story, I want you to think about your authentic self and how comfortable you can be, even being uncomfortable, being authentic, exactly as you are, knowing that you are enough and beautiful exactly as you are. The story goes that a 17-year-old boy was going to come out to his mom that night, and then he chickened out. So he asked his sister if she would do it for him. And she said, I'd be happy to. I'll tell mom that you're gay. And he said, here's the thing. If mom is not okay with me being gay, just tell her to leave the light in my bedroom off, and I will know at 9 o'clock not to come home. And I won't come home anymore. But if she's okay with me being gay, tell her to leave the light on, and I'll know it's okay to come home. And so at 9 o'clock, the appointed time, he's driving back to the house. And I always think of him as I tell this story. I imagine the 17-year-old I was, and those moments of having the keys to the car, to be out of the closet, the house, and to be on my own and to have agency. And my bedroom was right over the driveway. So I remember, as I tell the story, I'm thinking of my bedroom over the garage door. And he gets to the house at the appointed time, and he sees the light in his bedroom is on. But then he notices that the light in the kitchen is also on, and the light in the living room, and every single light in the house is on. And he imagines his mother saying to his sister, wait, 9 o'clock, what time? 9 o'clock? Running from room to room to make sure that he would know that it's okay to come home. Now, in the world today, unfortunately, most of the time, many times, the story doesn't end that way. It's a true story, but a lot of families don't end it with the light on. But I want you to think about who you are, who we are in this story, in order to understand how to be your authentic self. One, we are all the boy with a secret, the need to be known, permission to be exactly who we are, especially if who we are isn't who we want to be. Let me say that again. That's huge. We want permission to be who we are, even if who we are isn't who we want to be. We are the sister, the bystander, the ally, especially this month, Gay Pride Month. We are the mother, running from room to room, metaphorically making sure that everybody who needs to know knows that we are a safe place. But tonight I want to give you this challenge. I want you to recognize and I want you to know that you are also the light itself. You are the light that makes people want to feel safe. And that's how we heal each other. So if we're going to say that their memory is a blessing, it might be beneficial for us to remember that we, just being who we are, to have the courage to be who we are, can carry on that message. I want to end with this paragraph from a page out of John Lewis's memoir, Walking with the Wind. He opens his story of his memoir with the story of when he was a child, he was a little boy in a tiny town in Alabama. And he was playing with 12 of his friends. And suddenly a storm came through. And it turned into be a tornado. And he couldn't find his mother. But he could find his Aunt Saniva. So he ran to his Aunt Saniva's house with 15 of his friends. They all piled into this little one-room shack. And they started to notice that the sides of the house were swaying and then lifting from side to side. And he writes, that's when Aunt Saniva told us to hold hands and walk as a group toward the corner of the room that was rising. And from the kitchen to the front of the house, we walked with the wind screaming outside, sheets of rain beating on the tin roof. And then we walked the other direction as another end of the house began to lift. And so it went back and forth, 15 kids walking with the wind, holding that trembling house down with the weight of our small bodies. And it's been more than half a century since that day, and it struck me more than once that our society today is not unlike the children in that house. Rocked again and again by the winds of one storm or another, the walls around us seeming at times as if they might fly apart. It seemed that way in the 60s, at the height of the civil rights movement, when America itself felt as if it might burst at the seams with so much tension, so many storms. But the people of conscience never left the house. They never ran away. They stayed and they came together and they did their best, holding hands and moving toward the corner of the house that was the weakest. And then when another corner would lift, we'd go there, and eventually, inevitably, the storm would settle, and the house would still stand. But we knew that another storm would come, and we would have to do it all over again. Children holding hands, walking with the wind. That's America, John Lewis says. That's America to me. Not just the movement for civil rights, but the endless struggle to respond with decency, courtesy, dignity, and a sense of brotherhood to all the challenges that face us as a nation. This is our James Bond moment. And we know that while it's perilous at the beginning, this is not the way the story ends. May their memory be for a blessing. Shabbat Shalom.